Hi there. So today I'm going to talk about psychosis and telepathy. It's kind of a broad topic, and within that, thought broadcasting we'll talk about, because that's specifically mentioned in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is it's the Bible of the American Psychiatric Association, but it's used worldwide to diagnose psychiatric disorders. And in the UK, it's where I'm from, it's also used. Right, as an intro, we've got the word telepathy. How do we define that? So etymologically, it comes from Greek again. So tele part actually comes from tele, meaning far off, distant, and then path from pathos. And there's a bunch of different meanings for that, but I think the one that's most fitting for this would be feeling. So it's like distance, distant feeling. Other tele words we've got, obviously we've got television, that's probably one of the most widespread. So distance vision, telephone, distance sound or voice, telegram, distance letter, and telekinesis, distance movement. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about distant feeling, which would equate with a lot of people to like mind reading. I mean, in my case, or in my psychosis, it hasn't been so much of that. Things started out, well, we'll talk about my sort of journey on in the world of like telepathy and whether it's real and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like my first experiences were at a festival. I mean, probably when I had taken LSD as well. This wasn't at a festival, but just with some friends. Those experiences are usually quite hard to integrate because so much happens and so much of it is not is ineffable. It's hard to explain in words, but I feel like that would have probably been my first experience of it, although I didn't really know how to process it and how to put it in words. And then after that, I went to a festival in Germany in 2016, and experienced a bunch of really sort of magical phenomena, or what I was perceiving as magical phenomena. And one of them was, it was more like people were reading my mind. This is what I felt. And as an example, I might be in a group, or might be talking to a group of people, or rather talking to one person who is in a group of people, like someone with an entourage, and they might not be the kind of the main person in the group. You know, they're part of someone's entourage. I'd be talking to them, and I get the distinct impression that the let's say like the chief person, or the person at the top of that social hierarchy, was somehow talking through the person that I was talking to. So it was like I was having a conversation with a third party through someone else. It's like they were channeling them. That's what my impression of the situation was. That I found to be, it was a very strong impression of that. So that they were kind of my first experiences of it. And then after that, I think it would be defined more as, or what's defined as thought broadcasting, which features in the DSM as a sort of known what they class as a delusion. It says thought broadcasting is a delusion that one's thoughts are being broadcast out loud so that they can be perceived by others. Now, I didn't necessarily think they were being broadcast out loud on like loudspeakers somewhere. It was more that I felt like people were able to pick up on my thoughts. And it, I, in all honesty, I stand by that belief. It's very nuanced, and it's certainly not something that happens all of the time. And there's loads of factors that I think affect it. But I would say that we're all thought broadcasting all of the time, really. It's just that if you're not in the right environment, or not the right environment, if you're not in environment conducive to people picking up your thoughts, then they're not going to be picked up. So if you're around a bunch of yogis or people who are far on the path to spiritual enlightenment, then they're going to have more luck picking up your thoughts than a bunch of people who are in a lower vibrational state and not on that path. So I think it gets really complicated, because I think that saying that telepathy and thought broadcasting are delusional phenomena is kind of delusional in and of itself, or is just incorrect. I think each case has to be assessed on its own merit, its own sort of bases. And for me, looking back on it, there were definitely a load of times where it was psychosis, and I was thinking that people were picking up my thoughts when they weren't. But at other times, I feel like that it probably was the case. It sounds weird. I mean, it is weird. But is it psychotic? I think it's hard to say, really. The evidence there for it and against it, there's a lot of evidence for it. I mean, in cultural traditions, so in the yoga siddhis, the siddhis are kind of magical abilities, let's say, or extraordinary abilities that are picked up on the path to enlightenment. This is what the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali say. Patanjali, and it's mentioned there, along with that there's 5 or 6 from memory siddhis. Like telekinesis is also one of them, the ability for things moving. I think the siddhis aren't considered to be things that people seek. In fact, the sutras say specifically that you shouldn't seek them, like you shouldn't try and improve your telepathy or try and be telepathic. They're just side effects of that being in a higher vibrational state. So the siddhis, I would say, are pretty strong evidence, cultural evidence, anecdotal evidence, basically, for telepathy. And then in more modern times, there's various scientists who have studied it. One of my scientific heroes, Rupert Sheldrake, has probably written as much about it as anyone else in contemporary history. And he's written some really interesting books. There's one that is called something along the lines of Animals Who Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home and Other Strange Phenomena. And there's loads of really compelling evidence there for animal telepathy. But if we're supposed to be the higher beings, more developed than animals, not that we're like morally superior or anything, just that we have the same faculties they do, and then some others as well. So theoretically, if animals have that ability, then we should too. And there's loads of evidence that they do, not just from Sheldrake, but from animals like scarpering from the sites of natural disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes, that sort of thing, like days in advance. And then there's a difference of parrots being telepathic and saying things that their people are thinking. So I'd recommend looking into Rupert Sheldrake and his theory of morphic resonance, and a lot of things in that realm. So there's Rupert Sheldrake. There's loads of evidence for telepathy there, and then a chap called Dean Radin, who's written a couple of books that I have read that mention these things. Supernormal is one of them, which is great, and it sort of takes on the notion that often these phenomena are known as paranormal, which is, in this case, the prefix para is probably used to mean not. It's a Greek prefix that can mean all sorts of things confusingly. So not normal, and he argues that actually they are normal phenomena. If you talk to most people, particularly kids, they will say that, I do experience these things. It's just we kind of grow out of it. We're conditioned, we're disenchanted by society, and we grow out of the ability. We lose the abilities, and that's that. So supernormal, he talks about how these things are normal. Really, they're not paranormal. And then another book called Real Magic, which from memory has a lot of statistical proof for telepathic phenomena. My mind is made up, basically, not by my own ability. My ability seems to be yeah, I don't seem to be so good at picking up other people's thoughts. I mean, I think it really depends on the state that I'm in, but at times I think yes, and then other times no. Like at the moment, I would not say I'm even vaguely telepathic. You know, something I do try and cultivate, or like connection with spirit is something I do my best to cultivate. But yeah, so what is my understanding then of how telepathy works and how voices work and what the different sources of voices could be? So the Western medical explanation is that they must be hallucinations, meaning that it's within our heads and that yeah, telepathy is not real, etc. Okay, so firstly, I don't think that hallucination is particularly useful terminology, because modern science suggests that we, as humans, we do hallucinate our reality, whether we're sober or on particular substances, that all of this is hallucinated by the sort of circuit boards, to use a loose analogy, in our brain. So just because something is a hallucination does not make it untrue or false or non-existent, not real. So that is something that's not particularly helpful terminology, but let's roll with it anyway. I would suggest that, or in my experience, or my current understanding of it, is that the voices that I was hearing were from a mixture of sources, were from spirits, demons, angels, devas, whatever you want to call them, like disembodied spiritual beings. And within that, from the higher self of other humans. So for example, I might be having what I believe to be a telepathic conversation with a friend or a family member, but in actual fact I'm talking to their higher self and not talking to them. And what I'm saying is, I feel like it's possible to communicate telepathically with someone without their knowledge, because they're not picking it up. If they're not in touch with their higher self, if they're just fully in their body in the material realm, then they're not going to get the messages from their higher self. So you can chat all you want to someone's higher self, and if that's not filtering down to them, then it's all going to be unconscious. So I think part of that is what's been happening, that I've been getting messages or whatnot from people's higher selves and they're unaware of it. Mixed in with that, there's been definitely an element of psychosis, and where I think that's been happening and it hasn't, and I've just been like talking to my own ego. Or also another big one is talking to demons. So demon is a word that's been demonized, just means disembodied spirit. There's nothing inherently negative about it, but it's been twisted and turned and become this word that is typically understood to mean a negative, disembodied spirit. But let's use it in its proper term, which is really disembodied spirit, without a negative, positive twist to it. Now, demons, or the kind of dark demons, let's say, ones that feed off negative emotions, my understanding is that they will, the energy they feed off is easy to create with chaos. So if you want to create chaos in someone, then a good way to do that is to tell them lies. So you might be hearing a voice that you think is from your mother or your father or your sister or your friend, and the actual fact it's a spirit. It's a disembodied spirit that's impersonating those people, because another feature of these spirits is that they are able to impersonate. So without being a real adept and having kind of gone through the steps of spiritual training that I have not gone through, then it's very hard to tell what's what and who's who in that realm. So I think a bunch of it's talking to demons. I think that a lot of that depends on your inner state as well. Like if you're kind of living a pure life, then those demons aren't going to be able to communicate with you so easily. Whereas if it's kind of about what your demons are. So if you're doing things you don't want to be doing, and you're generally not in a particularly high vibrational state, then you're going to be in touch with beings that are on a similar level. So yeah, it's real confusing. And I think the only or the best way really is to go to either to learn a sort of spiritual discipline, go and learn yoga, or to go through the steps of a sort of mystery school, the likes of the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and Rosicrucians, these sorts of mystery schools. And I can't speak for them in terms of what they do or what they're responsible for, whether they're good or bad or in between, because I don't know. I'm not a part of any of those organisations, at least not consciously. So that's kind of how I feel like confusion can arise, because without having a good grasp of the spiritual world, you don't really know what you're communicating with. And there have been times where I feel like I've had some level of like directional capability, like I've been able to, I'd hear a voice that I recognised. I've never heard voices that I've thought were out loud, that have made me kind of turn my head, but I have heard voices that I feel like I've been able to pinpoint where they were from. I had a weird experience during a psychotic episode once where I felt like I had some clothing, it was a baseball cap that I felt like it had EMF shielding in it, and that it would prevent people or you from picking up telepathic messages directionally. And I mean, the notion that EMF blocking can prevent telepathy I think that's got a lot of validity to it. If you look up, this is kind of moving into a different psychosis, so I'll probably talk about that another day, or leave it there, or leave the telepathy thing there. So yeah, what are your thoughts on it? I'm interested to hear in the comments whether people think that telepathy can be real or is nonsense, or what people feel about it. Alright, bye.